Good morning, dear friends. Today is Thursday, the 20th of Av, and it is the 29th of July. We're studying the Talmud, the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Presently studying the Sechet Shabbat, chapter 6. We're towards the end. We're on 66b, and then we're going to jump back to 66a to fill in the part of the Gemara that we skipped over yet temporarily yesterday. We're talking about stuff that a person wears or carries or has on their person. When may it be transported around and when may it not be transported around? We studied two Mishnahs yesterday. A Mishnah that spoke of a person that is lo yaleinu, God forbid, handicapped and amputee, and which items he may carry in the outside and which items he may not carry in outside. Just to re-emphasize, the items that we said you cannot carry are because they were not as essential for the person's movement. And so it's pretty clear that a crutch or something that a person would actually need to get around would likely be permitted. Again, this is not a halacha l'maisa, but likely such items would be permitted. All the items that are prohibited, and we're going to discuss it a little more today, would be prohibited because they are not being used for transportation. And that is pretty clearly what the pshat is in the Gemara. We then studied another Mishnah, which spoke about kids and the stuff that they might have on their person or go out and about with. And we spoke about nuts, ksharim. And we thought that the ksharim, or the first idea the Gemara explained, is that the ksharim was something that people would use to combat attachment. Sometimes a young boy would not let his father go, or the father would have to go, and the kid would be very depressed and sad and longing for his father. It's good that a kid wants their father, but the kid also needs to function. And so there was this thing where they would wrap straps or tie on the left arm, like it's kind of in the same place as the tefillin, to assist the child in this getting over his homesickness or whatever. And then the Gemara challenged that perhaps, the Gemara initially said that it was madder, M-A-D-D-E-R. And it had some therapeutic values, which our dear pharmacist, or Alan McCoyan, looked up and helped us out. It used to have a lot of different function, still maybe does, but you should be careful. There's a lot of hazards that come along with it. And then the Gemara challenged, well, that would apply for everyone. So what's distinct about children? And then we brought in the homesickness remedy presented in the Gemara. Then we went on to talk about other kinds of remedies that can be done on Shabbos, like the bankis, I think we said it was cups. And another kind of way to try to help a person diffuse their intoxication, they should become sober once again, oil and salt. Basically, they want you to spill some dressing. Give me one second, I just need to mute myself. Sorry, folks. So we talked about different remedies, different medical or medicinal stuff, remedies that were done on Shabbos, and that is where we are. Let's share the screen. Let's jump back into the Gemara and get on our way. Hold on. Almost there. All right. We previously cited Aim, the mother of Abaya. We explained, I think Rashi, or maybe it wasn't Rashi, but we explained famously Abaya was an orphan or was raised by a surrogate, not a surrogate, was raised by a nanny or an adoptive mother or something to that effect. And she is quoted a number of times in the Gemara, including in our Gemara. And the initial comment that he made had to do with, hold on, is this the one? Now let's find the original Amar Li Aim. Oh, here. This was about the matter. Abaye says, Amr li aim. If you recall, 3 garlands seize the progression, 5 heal, and 7 are like super powerful. That was a while ago, and we went through a number of other remedies and things that a person might do. Now the Gemara gives us some other teachings from Aim, from Abaye's nanny, adoptive mother, whatever you want to call her. Here we go. Amar Abaye, Abaye said, Amar li Aim, mom, his adoptive mother, Aim says, Kol minyane, whenever there is an incantation involved in healing, lachash lichishot, and this was prevalent, especially in medicine of the world of the Mishnah and the Gemara. There were different times applications along with incantations, whispers, stuff that was recited, sometimes using the name of the patient. So Aim said, you know what? Whenever you do a lechisha, whenever you do an incantation, bishma de'ima, then you always mention the mother's name. Chaim ben Sarah. Bishma de'ima ploini, then ploinis. B'chol kitri, but when there are knots, and whenever you're tying knots, because sometimes knots are used in medical treatment, Bismillah, it is always on the left side. Always on the left side. Why? So it's brought over here, the Marshal brings, that we have absolute certainty about the identity of the mother of a person. There's always a slight doubt about the father. That's what it says. Okay, not that there's a doubt, but we can be even more certain about the person's mother. And that's why today, with 23andMe and these other genetic testings, there are plenty of stories of people discovering that the person they thought was their father is not their father. Anyways, and why is tying always on the left? Azoi. All right. V'amar Abaye further quoted his mother saying, Amr li'aim, kol minyane dimif parshe, every time there's an incantation with a specific number of times to be repeated. You better follow all the instructions on the bottle. Follow every last detail. Rashi, kol lachashim, because apparently in medicine you had incantations. I know Reb Allen and Reb Errol, you don't sell incantation books in your pharmacies, I should say. But apparently back then that's what was done. So you better follow the instructions.
Yeah.
Udela mifarshi, and when the prescription, the instructions does not come with a number of times to recite it. You know how many times you need to say the incantation? Are you ready for this? Arboyin v'chad zimni, 41 times. That's a lot of times.
Rabbi, I thought incantations was something else.
What did you think it is?
From what I heard, it's like saying magical words to raise the dead or something like that.
So speech could be used in many different ways. Some that are problematic, others that are not. Certainly, if you're trying to raise the dead or do anything of that sort, that would be a problem. But apparently in those days, there were also certain words that were understood to have medical value, not connected to Avodah Zarah. I can't quite explain to you why it would have, what its purpose was, because it's very much not in our universe. But apparently it was considered an acceptable practice. The Steinsaltz Gemara has a note over here. It says, by the way, read our essay elsewhere that talks about how to understand remedies in the Gemara. Should you actually be taking matter in your own hands and the like and using incantations? But suffice it to say, it was understood to be a remedy. It could be done. Give me another second. Let me see if I can find anything else to add to the subject.
Is anybody going to comment why Dafka 41?
I'm not seeing a lot of assistance in that regards. Any theories about the significance of 41?
I don't know. What's the gematria of?
I don't know. It's an interesting. I'm a little bit out of my league, I gotta admit. This is not my.
I don't know. What happens if you say it only 40 times? You don't get cured completely?
I don't know. Apparently, you got to do it. How many times are you supposed to chew every item of food?
It depends if you have your gold tooth or your silver tooth.
Or if you have any teeth.
Yeah, that's true too. Hold on, I'm looking through. So Reb Allen, the Kohen, asks a good question. Alan's question was, why are you allowed to do these incantations? Isn't this something kind of spooky, kind of magic-y, kind of supernatural? And if you're already going to the supernatural, why don't you just rely on Hashem? That was Alan's question, and it's a good question. And actually, I'll tell you something else. Alan has been a very dependable source of providing this point, and it's an important point, so please don't stop, which is a reminder, what's with simple faith in God? So the Meiri writes that when the Gemara talks about incantations, certainly the primary point over here is not the incantation, but there was a notion that they healed. And it was mostly a bubbies kind of thing. You know, the bubbies have special remedies. And Alan, you went to pharmacy school and you learned about how medicine works and compounds and whatever it is. But you'll go try to convince your grandmother, right, when you're fresh out of school, that her chicken soup and garlic and whatever doesn't work. So the Meiri says that these were remedies that were out there. It's not permissible because ultimately there was no faith involved. It was understood to have a remedy. So the Meiri is saying it's not necessarily that we should be taking this so seriously, but you should know that this was the known formula. This is how these things work. Again, we're not quoting we're quoting a safta essentially. We're quoting a nanny who shared that this is how it's done. Now, to Reverel's question, why are we mentioning names in the mother's name and the numbers? So Rashi says, and this is a question and this is a question that comes up to this very day. How should a person be referred to when we pray for them? How should they be referred to when they're called up to the Torah? How should the person be referred to when you say, Kaddish? And actually, even today, there's a dispute for a person that is deceased. In the Sephardic world, they seem to still use the mother's name. In the Ashkenazic world, predominantly, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, or certainly in the Chabad world, a person that is of the living, we talk about the mother's name, and when a person is deceased, we more often use the father's name, except for when getting called to the Torah, where we use the father's name, and other circumstances. Why will we call to the Torah to use the father's name? Probably because there's a difference between one's essential Judaism and their tribal affiliation. Torah reading is somewhat connected to the tribal affiliation, so it makes sense that we should call up with the father's name, because that's what determines if you get the first aliyah like Reb Allen does, or the second aliyah like Dr. Pasternak does, or the third aliyah, like Mark and Beryl get. The Rashba is quoted here to say, although to us really there's no difference, mother or father, people had observed with a scientific method that these incantations work better than using the mother's name. Why? Who knows? Someone might say that when a person hears their mother's name, it calms them down. It puts them in a calmer, more relaxing and healthier headspace. Maybe. The Marshal says, because people are, like I said, closer to their mother, or more certainly aware of who their mother is. The Chassam Sofer says, want to hear some not politically correct Kabbalistic ideas? Much of the impurity of the world comes sitra de nukva, from the feminine side. This doesn't mean that women are impure, but Kabbalistically, there is the masculine and feminine dynamics. Feminine means susceptible, in Kabbalistic terms, recipient, susceptible to influence. And so Kabbalistically, again, we're not saying anything negative about women. Kabbalistically, the nukva is susceptible to impurity. And that's where illness comes from. And we're afraid that there's some kind of hex, there's some kind of jinx on the person that comes from the impure place. So to undo it, we're going to mention the feminine part, which is the mother's name. Then when he says, when it comes to matters of Kedusha, we follow the father. Again, I'm just sharing this with you because I'm seeing it. I'm not the, this is an interesting perspective. Furthermore, there are certain commentaries, including the Chassam Sofer, who say this Gemara might be a source to that when we daven for a person, we actually use the mother's name, because healing in general could be more associated to the person than the mother. And indeed, the Zohar confirms that when it comes to davening for somebody, we should daven for them with their mother's name. And indeed, that is a practice that you find certainly in the Hasidic world, and I suspect beyond.
Rabbi,
yes.
Today we're faced with many people, whatever the reason, they want both the mother and the father's name mentioned.
So gesund.
And I guess we just accommodate them.
So gesund for the most part. Although I wouldn't say that it's a good idea to rewrite minhagim, and they should understand that it's not an insult to one or the other gender. There's just a formula for how the prayers and how a person is identified. Judaism follows the mother. Tribal affiliation follows the father. And so basically, for a human being to exist, they need equally a mother and a father. And just the mother won't do any good. Just the father won't do any good. I think this is mostly scientifically confirmed, although maybe today, who knows? And now, while we're on the subject of why we mention the mother's name when we daven as opposed to the father, there's further discussion. While we're on the subject, let me share this with you. Some say that maybe it's because the father is not really the father, and therefore you could end up essentially praying for the wrong person. You're saying it's Chaim ben Zev, and really it's not Chaim ben Zev, so then his prayers are not being accurately composed. This is also from the Samson.
I always thought that the mother was the one that provided comfort and healing. This is why when you do a Mishabera for a Chola, you always use the mother's name.
That could be too. Or like I said, a person might feel more comfortable hearing the mother's name. That might bring back warm and fuzzy feelings, right?
Same. While the father,
no offense to all the fathers on this group, but many times when a kid has a boo-boo, they go to their mother, not to their father. Not always.
Everything else is normally as the father. The name when they get called up, the name when they put it. And unfortunately, on the Maseva, it's always been the father.
But folks, I want to say a very pro women comment to close things out. You know why we mention the mother's name, not the father's name? because the majority, women are a little bit more compliant with their Jewish responsibility than men. And so many times a man's name might be associated with a certain kitrug, a certain prosecution. The father, he's got his own baggage. And so we're trying to find the path of least resistance. So the chayla might have a certain kitrug. We need to identify them by the parent, but we're going to identify them by the father. We may end up tacking on additional kitrugim because the father, which predominantly is a little less compliant and a little less in good standing with their Yiddishkeit than the mother, says the Torah Lishma. Therefore, we'd rather mention the mother's name. The odds are better that the tefillah will be accepted. Isn't that interesting?
My experience was I had to send my mother to negotiate for me to get something from my father.
Oh. Lastly, although we said that you need a father and a mother to have a child, who ultimately gets more credit for the body of a person? The father who contributed the slightest amount of genetic material, or the mother who carried the child for 9 months and then possibly nursed them or cared for them? So certainly more about a person's material and physical well-being, and this might be what Mark was saying, is connected to the father, is connected to the mother. And so it only makes sense that when davening for a person's physical well-being, the mother should be mentioned because they're more of the person's body, their existence is connected to the mother. I rest my case. Okay, anyways, that is the little presentation over here about that. So you might still be frustrated. Why are these incantations existing at all? It seems like it was common. It wasn't considered avodah zarah. It wasn't considered a Gentile practice. Now, why were there these preferences? Azoi, people did studies and observations, and they noticed that there was greater effectiveness doing it this way, and so that's how they continued doing it. All right, ready for a new subject. I want to thank everyone for your participation and assistance as we went through this interesting subject. And now I'm reminded I should change the layout. All right. Tan Rabbanan, new Gemara. Now we're going back to healing stuff. It's not super new, but I'm saying back to our previous discussion. Yotzin be'eben tekuma b'Shabbos. A person is allowed to wear a stone that's called eben tekuma. Rabbi Steinsaltz translates as a preservation stone. Let's see Rashi. Even shenoisois oisa nashim ubarais shelo pilu. There was a certain kind of stone that pregnant women would wear to fight miscarriages. And in Old French, it's called kutana, kantin. A supporting kind of device. I'm not sure if Rashi. Well, anyways, there we go. It was a device to prevent miscarriages. Lo alinu. Let's see Rabbi Steinsaltz for a moment. He probably elaborates a bit on this.
He says what? Oh,
No, I mean in the notes. Rabbi Steinsaltz says that it was probably a kind of amulet with some kind of supernatural connection to preventing miscarriages. That's what Rabbi Steinsaltz says.
It really concentrated.
Mishum Rabbi Meir Amru. Rabbi Meir taught. Af b'mishkal even tekuma. You can even have alongside the stone the counterbalance, the counterweight. Sometimes to carry a stone on one side would cause you to be lopsided. And so they would have another stone to make sure that their weight was balanced. Does that make sense?
sort of. I guess depending how heavy the stone is.
Yeah. V'lo shehipila, we're not talking about a circumstance where a person has already miscarried or maybe and therefore they are prone to miscarriages. Eloshema tapil, even a person who has never miscarried, and they're just being hyper vigilant to try to avoid miscarriage. Veloisha Ibra, we're not even talking about a person who knows they're pregnant. Even it may be carried Shema Tisaber Visapil, a woman in the childbearing years who is hoping to become pregnant. They too may carry this item lest they become pregnant and that, God forbid, lose the pregnancy. This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Amar Rabbi Yemar bar Shalemya Mishmei Abaya. Says Rabbi Yemar, son of Shalemya, in the different name of Abaya. Hod ichavan v'itkal. When will this stone work? Let's see Rabbi Steinsaltz. This only applies when the counterbalanced stone was found to be of equal weight, and not that he actually modified the stone to be the right weight. Rashi. Why? I don't suppose we're talking about doing this on Shabbos. Hold on, let me see. Interesting. The counterbalancing stone would need to be naturally the right kind of weight. Okay, I must be missing something. Hang on one second. All right, let me revise my translation here. Apparently, again, this is by reading this again based on and looking in the commentaries. Apparently, there was a stone that was known to be effective to prevent miscarriages. And apparently, there was if you had something of the same weight, it would also be effective somehow. And therefore, we're saying if something was naturally the same exact weight as your stone that's supposed to help for miscarriage, that would also somehow help for miscarriages. Again, this is not quite my cup of tea, but that's what it seems to be saying. That's what we're saying. It has to be naturally that way. It cannot be baya mishkal to mishkal mai. What about let's see, Rabbi Steinsaltz. I'm not sure what's going on over here. With regards to the counterweight, meaning one who finds an object and figures out its weight by weighing it against the counterweight of a previous one. What is the legal status? Basically, if I understand Rabbi Steinsaltz correctly, we're talking about a kli shlishi. You have the Eben Mishkel and you weigh something against it and you find out its weight. And now you have another stone and you weigh it against the other stone. So apparently, the way this segula worked, and this is just based on what I'm reading, what you're reading, you had the stone that was the kameya, the amulet. You put it on a scale and you found another stone that was precisely the same weight. The power of the amulet could be conveyed to this other stone somehow. Again, we're talking about things that are not quite scientific. Then if you found a third thing with the same weight, could you also wear that to prevent a miscarriage? And the Gemara here says teku. It's not clear that this would be acceptable.
It's amazing how far we've come.
Scientifically?
Yeah.
I don't know how far we've come. That people would think these things called pyramids that they wear and they do. I'm not so sure.
Good luck.
In the footnotes in my Gemara, it says as follows. Why should somebody be allowed to carry around a stone? So just because people think it helps for miscarriage, people should be allowed to carry it around? So it says over here, because ultimately people felt and actually observed that it had some kind of effectiveness. Therefore, it's considered like a garment. So we're not even talking about if it's actually medically effective, Reb Allen. But being that people understand this to be a medically effective item, therefore they're allowed to wear it. This is what the Rashba says.
It's almost like a placebo.
Maybe.
Maybe it builds up the right muscles by carrying this extra weight around it.
Maybe it helped the person build up muscles that helped them carry their, who knows? Maybe it was effective.
Rabbi, I'm surprised that nobody brings up the argument whatever is going to attach the two stones could be considered tamei, and the handle and the
No,
whole
not,
thing would apply
no,
here.
I revised my interpretation. They're not actually connected. They're not connected, and they're not even being carried at the same time. What I presently understand is that your amulet, your stone works. Not only does your stone work, but if you'll find a stone that's an identical weight and you'll weigh it against each other, the power of the stone is transferred. How that works and why that works, this sounds magical. It sounds not quite medical the way we know it. But actually, Mark had a very good theory. Maybe it helped create some kind of balance or help the person stand with a certain posture that was advantageous for pregnancy. Who knows? You never know. Crazier things have happened. I just want to take a peek for a moment in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. It says like this: Yoitza, the Even Tekuma. A person may go out on Shabbos with an Even Tekuma. What is an Even Tekuma? Even Yedua Shekishhi al Isha Loitapel is a kind of stone that everybody knows works to prevent miscarriages. So if there was, or when there was, a known idea as a certain stone that prevents miscarriages, you'd be allowed to wear it. Hold on. Interestingly, the Taz. Hold on.
Or had to be hung on a chain or something.
You're saying that, or you're?
I'm guessing because normally, like with the amulet and all the other things, they were always there on a chain or something, so you weren't actually carrying them in the normal way. You were at least carrying them in at least in some form of machine, like if you're able to be a straight out carrier, to stick it in your pocket type of thing, or hold it in your hand.
Right. So what exactly is this stone? We're talking about a stone known as the Even Tekuma. It's known to prevent miscarriages, but what kind of stone is it? So I've never heard of this before, or at least I don't remember. I imagine when I learned this Gemara last time, I probably saw this, but I didn't really understand that. I still don't understand quite what this Even Tekuma is. But I want to just take a little survey based on, I have some different resources on Masechah Shabbos here. So Rabbi Steinsaltz draws a picture of a stone amulet, which he understands to have been effective in those days. That's what Rabbi Steinsaltz says. The Mesivta Gemara here quotes, well, actually, no, the Mesivta Gemara gives the translation as follows. An Even Tekuma is an unbreakable stone. You can hit it with a hammer, and it still doesn't break. That's what it says. And this is explained by the Ran. Another commentary says an Even Tekuma simply means a kind of stone that helps the child's the pregnancy be viable. Others explain that it was a kind of stone that was hollow in the middle, and from its creation, it was kind of like a stone that within the stone was a stone. And so according to this interpretation, brought in the Marshal, the stone itself looked representative of like a pregnancy. It was like a stone pregnant with a stone inside of it. So that's another option. Now we have here the Code of Jewish Law open. And I have the Taz. And the Taz says, V'nira, d'hainu masha anu kodim shterishus. So I don't know what a shterishus is. But it seems like this was a known item in the 1700s. Let's Google what's a shterishus. And what do you know? The internet delivers. Bear with me just a moment here.
Rabbi, also psychologically, whatever people believe in tends to work.
Yeah, depends for what. An illness that needs positive or relaxation, maybe, but placebo only goes so far. So interestingly enough, this is a website that's certainly not scientific or authoritative, but I just Googled Steren Schuss, which is the word that the Taz uses to describe the Eben Tekuma. And what do you know? A year and a half ago, somebody posted on this website called Miodeh, which I have no idea what this website is. And he says that the Taz defines the Eben Tekuma as a Steren Schuss, and he wants to know what is a Steren Schuss. And so there are different answers here. Rabbeinu Bechaya says that it's a ruby, says somebody. Others say it's a carnelian. Others say it's an eagle stone. Now we have here that it's a kind of stone. Let's see. Chaim Bachler, a commentary in the time of the Taz, writes as follows. Shooting stars that shoot from place to place. That this word Sternenschuss is actually means like a shooting star. Which then says that it's more likely that the stone mentioned by the Taz could be a meteorite. Oh, that sounds very interesting. Because Stern does mean stars. Sternenschuss means a shooting star. But it's hard to capture a shooting star and carry it around.
I'm surprised nobody says it's a diamond, and the bigger, the more effective.
Well, the non-breakable part makes it sound like a diamond. All right, I think this is going to be the end of our research thus far. So we have basically a ruby, a hollow stone, a meteorite, a lot of different possibilities here. And this thing called an eagle stone. Have you ever heard of an eagle stone?
No.
Me neither. Me neither. But apparently in the ancient world, it was understood that it was good for eagle stone. Check this out. Eagle stones might be referring to a kind of stone that was hollow and had a reputation to be helpful in childbirth. So that, all right, let's go back to the Gemara. Very interesting. Let's just take a look at the Mishnah Brura, see if he has anything else. He quotes the Taz and the Marshal, and it's a hollow stone. There you go. All right, there you have it. Eben Tekuma, another interesting subject. Another teaching from Abaya's aim. If you have fever for one day or a one-day fever, a one-day bug, take a white, newly minted stone. I'm sorry, newly minted coin, a dinar. Go to the salt pools, and weigh out the equal weight of a dinar of salt, and bind it to this neckline with a thread made of hair. Ooh. This sounds like Rashi, Zuzah, Chivra, sort of a chadash, brand new, newly minted. למילכה, למוקם, שריפס, המים, שאויסן, הגר, מספס, היום, להמשך מים, לבריחס, לרחובס, הסויס, לקח, שמל, סויס, המחריtzim, והשם is ramam, shemelchem, hem nasmal. Basically, go to the place where they would take salt water, seawater, and dry it up so that it would be salt. And put it under your neck or near your neck with a thread of hair. Sounds pretty interesting, but that's what she told him. Why a new zuz? I don't know. Let's see some more. Viloi. Let's say you're still not feeling well. This hasn't helped. Go sit in the crossroads where two roads cross. If you'll see an ant, a big ant, lishkale, take the ant, and take it to a copper tube. Seal it up with lead. Seal it with 60 seals. Give me 1 second. Seal it up with 60 seals. Rabbi Stein's also shake it, and lift it. And tell the ant or tell the tube, my burden is upon me and my burden is upon you. Rashi, big ant, grab that ant, basically seal it up really tight. Shaking around, carry it. So basically, you're inviting the ant to accept your illness.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I can see how this works because by the time the guy does all this, the fever should be gone.
He breaks the fever.
Till he'll find the tube, until he'll do the 60 seals, the fever should be gone.
And the Gemara asks a very interesting question. V'dilma inish ashkiche v'ifsik bey. Maybe the ant you found has already undergone the fever transfer ceremony. And now, by you saying your burden is mine and my burden is yours, you may be inviting someone else's fever on you. Elabemole, revise your comments to the ant and tell him, you keep your burden and you'll take my burden too. Just to be careful. V'iloi, so remedy number 1 was the stone with the salt on your neck. Remedy 2 is to get an ant and to transfer it in with these special conditions. Now, if that doesn't work, v'iloi lishkel kuza chadita, take a brand new jug, v'lezel and ahara, and go to a river. Rashi says a small earthenware dish. V'lezel and ahara, and go to a river, v'lemole, and say to the river, Nehara, Nehara, dear river, uspan kuza damaya le'orcha de'iklali, lend me a jug of water for a guest that I just happened to find. V'lehader shav zimni al reshe, and he should take this over his head 7 times. Rashi says, Yikifeno sivas Rashi, put it on your head like a paris. V'lishti la'achore, and then throw it behind you. Pour out the water behind you. V'leimole, and say, Nahara, Nahara, shkol maya di'ahavasli, de'orcha de'ikli b'yoyme aso v'yeve azal. Take back your water, because the guest who came to me has left today. So, a lot of things to do if you have a fever.
Outrageous.
You mean you've never tried this before?
We're gonna get in trouble for practicing medicine without a license.
This is for academic purposes only. Don't try this at home.
Rabbi, I guarantee you somewhere somebody is going to figure out why salt, why this, why that, and there's something behind it. some thread of positive stuff.
Absolutely. But I want to read for you. So I just found this morning an Art Scroll Gemara. So let's see if he has anything to share on this. So first of all, the Evan Tekuma, he gives all the explanations that we already gave. However, adding with a name, the Ran says that this is a diamond. Okay. Now back to our fever treatment. I just want to read for you this note. Many commentaries, this is an Art Scroll, many commentaries, by the way, there's a whole talk of the Rebbe about this as well, what to make of the remedies of the Gemara's time, but for another time. Many commentaries ask an obvious question about this Gemara. The Gemara says, oh, actually, no, this comment will be better understood if we read a little bit further in the Gemara. So let's hold off to this comment. But what I do, yeah, let's learn a little more, and we might even have to do this comment tomorrow. And by the way, folks, we're really close to the end of the parak. We're very close to closing out chapter 6, and within but a day or two, we'll be ready for chapter 7, which is very exciting. Who here? Anyone here? We're going to have to file chapter 7. All right, Amar Avona. Le'ishasa tilta. If you have a tertian fever, pharmacists, what's a tertian fever? Ever heard of that?
No.
No.
Well, Rabbi Steinsaltz, which afflicts a person every 3 days. Rashi, shechefes shalishis, shaba megimel yamim legimel yamim. A fever that comes around every 3rd day. Lysi Shiva Silvi Mishiva Dikli. Get 7 thorns from 7 palm trees. Mishiva Tzivi Mishiva Kshuri. 7 slivers from 7 beams. Shiva Sichei Mishiva Geshuri. 7 pegs from 7 bridges. Don't get caught dismantling a bridge or there may be some problems. Shiva Kitmi Mishiva Taniri. 7 scoops of ash from 7 ovens. Shiva Afri, Mishiva Sunri, 7 dust from 7 different door sockets. Shiva Kufri, Mishiva Arvi, 7 kinds of tar from 7 kinds of boats. Mishiva Buni Kamoni, 7 cumin seeds. Shiva Bine Midikno de Kalbasava, 7 hairs from the beard of an old dog. And then bind all of this stuff to your neck.
While he's doing this, if he doesn't die, he's going to be cured. It'll take him 1.5 years to do this.
Listen, if you have practice, I'm sure you can do it faster.
He has to do it himself, or he can buy it prepared in the pharmacy?
I am sure there was a yeshiva bacher who was selling.
In the pharmacy. In the pharmacy.
He had a pharmacy and would sell dog hairs and boat tar.
When you have malaria, it gives you a fever like that.
Oh, really? It comes and goes?
It comes and goes
Wow.
till it gets worse and worse.
Oh, yeah. So today, there's some medicines that work for malaria, no?
Sure.
Baruch Hashem. Isn't that, is it ivermectin that they use for malaria?
No, but
No.
They used to use quinine. No, but...
Correct. One of those
medicines.
medicines that everyone's talking about nowadays.
What's interesting is you need a passport showing that you took the malaria drug. So that's
Right, if you travel to those parts of the world, yeah.
Yeah. Supposedly Hebrew U is just working on something that's supposed to be effective.
Really?
Kills a lot of people still. We don't realize in North America.
We're spoiled, huh? Can I know her? Should stay that way. Well, I'm looking for some comments about this. This is an interesting remedy.
There's so much here. I mean, if you want to look at it, he has to do this himself if we read the Hebrew, no?
It doesn't seem like he has to do it himself, but it seems like he has to have it done. Now,
how
are
do
you
you-
gonna
who
help
knows
your
what-
friend go Meshuggah collecting boats and splinters?
How old is a dog? You have to ask the dog how old he is.
Yeah. And the beard, what part of the dog is considered a beard? A lot of questions, a lot of questions. Suffice it to say, this was the medicine of that age. And
I
again,
don't. A thread made of hair is not going to last very long. I don't know unless they didn't wash that often.
no. So Bli Neder tomorrow, I'm going to try to find for you an article, a little essay on the matter, and I'll try to share with you a little vart, a little teaching from the Rebbe, how to make sense of these Gemaras that talk about refuahs and why the time of the Gemara they had these remedies that seem to have worked. Why don't they work today? Or what's changed? And should you take the Gemara
It's
seriously?
funny.
I'll tell you about there are commentaries that say, listen, the medicine of the Gemara was the medicine of that era, and the Gemara just records known remedies. Not that today anyone should try to do these.
What's very
Why
funny.
why does the Gemara even choose to record
Yeah.
these remedies? Why is it considered Torah? That's the question. Rebbe, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's very funny because today a remedy for a hangover is something with the hair of a dog. No, if I remember the expression.
Das habe ich keinmal nicht gehört.
Alan.
I have no idea. I was in diapers at that.
You never heard that expression? Something to do with having a hangover after drinking.
When that happened, I was still in diapers.
All right, I just want to close out with a very different topic. We have 2 minutes left. I want to thank you all for joining us on today's interesting tour through the Gemara and through remedies. Tomorrow, Bli Neder will close out the subject. Then we'll jump back to the small part of the Gemara we skipped over. But today is an important day in the Jewish calendar. Today is the 20th of Av. The 20th of Av is the yard site of the Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, the sainted Kabbalist, Posek, Tzaddik, and Baal Mesiras Nefesh, the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, who was the Rav in Dnieper Petrovsk in Yekaterinoslav, I believe it was called, and he fought against Soviet anti-Jewish, anti-traditional oppression to the point where he finally was arrested and ultimately died as a result of his imprisonment and exile. He was the last formal Rav, I believe, that was resisting in that region. He fought to provide Jews with matzahs, to keep mikvahs open and to keep Yiddishkeit thriving at one of the hardest times, if not from the hardest times in Jewish history. He was a great Torah scholar, and tragically much of his work was lost, but some of his work were preserved because when he was in exile and he had only 2 or 3 Sfarim, his wife made homemade ink, and he wrote Chidushei Torah without having any references on the space around his books, though, because there's a little bit of a margin on top and around. And those writings were printed in a series called Likutei Levi Yitzchak. And the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, every single Shabbos for a number of years, starting from the 70s, I believe 75 or 7, I don't remember exactly, the Rebbe would every single Shabbos discuss a vart from his father's writings. And because they were so shorthand, the Rebbe would elaborate and explain them. And the Rebbe actually was, or credited his father for much of his Torah scholarship. And if you spoke to anybody that understood a little bit about true Torah genius and knowledge and scholarship, they would tell you the Rebbe was head and shoulders above really anyone else. And his style and his teachings were inspired by his father, Rabbi Yitzchak. So it's a chusa yagin aleinu. His merit should protect and be a blessing for all of us. And we should be zocheh to see lots of goodness in our lives and in our communal life and for Klal Yisrael on this auspicious day. And I just want to add, I don't know if you know this, but for those that join us Friday nights, for the last year plus, or 2 years, I think, we always try to share a vart from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak on Friday night between Mincha and Ma'ariv. And so we have an extra connection. And so again, we should only have good news. I want to thank all of our dear friends for joining on this interesting and somewhat different journey today in the Gemara. So have a wonderful day. Yasher koach to all. And hope to see you.
Thank you.
To see you tomorrow. Gesundheit and Freilichkeit. And just let's add again a tefillah for Boris Ben Chaye Shever for Shlema, a young man, and hopefully he'll be restored to his good health. Have a wonderful day. Thank you all.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you to all of our Talmidei Chachamim. Shkoyach. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Shkoyach.